Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, FPL Consult here, and in today's video I'm going to share with you guys an early Game Week 6 wildcard. Now I myself am on this strategy, so I will be doing extensive research into a Game Week 6 wildcard and I'll be putting it into all my videos this week. If you guys are on a similar strategy and you would like to follow along as I attempt to build the best Game Week 6 wildcard for myself and in that process help you guys as well, feel free to scroll down a little bit to subscribe so you won't miss any of the videos this week. We are also very close to 9,000 subscribers, so if you guys have been watching my content all this while and you haven't subscribed, or if you are new to the channel, please do consider scrolling down a little bit to hit the subscribe button to get us a little bit closer to that milestone. It would mean the world to me to be able to hit 9,000 subscribers. So before we jump into the actual wildcard, I have a couple of things that I would like to talk about, and it's starting with a couple of things to consider on a Game Week 6 wildcard. So the first point I have here is to even question the Game Week 6 wildcard, whether we should be using it now or delaying it by 1 week into Game Week 7. What I would say is that despite Game Week 6 being a popular window, there will be a bunch of people with teams that are better to wildcard in Game Week 7 instead. Now, let me give you guys an example. So for Game Week 6, my team has triple Brighton against Chelsea away. I also have triple Liverpool, that's fine. They have Wolves away, but I have 0 Arsenal players for that Leicester at home game. I also have 0 Brentford players, no Mbeumo, no Flecken whatsoever for West Ham at home, which is currently when their fixture swing starts. And I also have only 1 free transfer in Game Week 6. I have no rolled transfers into Game Week 6, so it's simply that 1 transfer that I got in Game Week 6 to address my team if I want to save the wildcard. So basically, I'm in a position where it's pretty straightforward for me. I need to wildcard into Game Week 6 because my team looks pretty bad. So this was part of the plan already, but I know there will be a group of people looking at your Game Week 6 teams. You have triple Liverpool against Wolves. Why not keep them? You have Fulham against Nottingham Forest, not the worst fixture in the world as well. You have maybe Eberechi Eze playing Everton in Game Week 6. Why not keep him as well? So overall, your team maybe does not look that bad. And maybe you could delay it into Game Week 7 instead, where usually the teams that are thinking about a Game Week 6 or 7 wildcard, their teams in 7 would look pretty bad. So I would just say that it is very team dependent. I know you guys hate it when everyone says it's team dependent, but unfortunately in this case, it really is very much so. And I would say don't go along with the crowd. See what is better for your team, and if you feel like saving the wildcard in Game Week 6 and using it in Game Week 7 instead is the play for your team, then go ahead with it and don't let the crowd kind of fool you into which is the best week to wildcard. So for my own self, I've had an assessment and I felt like it's the best week for me to wildcard now. But let me know down in the comments below whether you are tempted to wildcard in Game Week 7 instead. There will be a group of you guys, so I'd be keen to know your thoughts. Now, the next part is addressing that group of people who are set to wildcard, like myself. So if you are fixed on a wildcard in Game Week 6, my advice would be activate it right now. Why? It's simply because Game Week 6 is a very popular wildcard window. There are fixture swings for a couple of teams as well, Arsenal and Brentford just to speak of a couple. But I do think like this week is where we will see relatively more price rises as well as price falls. Those not on a wildcard will start to bring in players from these teams to target. Those on the wild card will also be bringing in similar players. The difference is that transfers that are made after the wild card is activated will not contribute to a player rising or falling in price. But as I've said, there will be people not using their wild card and their transfers will contribute to price changes. So basically this week, given all the fixture swings, there will pretty much be quite a number of price rises and price falls. So you don't want to lose this opportunity to increase your team value, and by the same token as well, you don't want to be holding on to players that are going to fall in price, because if you're on a wildcard, you have the opportunity actually to increase your team value, and you can do this by, similar to what I'd be doing as well, starting immediately to bring in players that are likely to rise and also sell players that are likely to fall, whether or not you intend to have them in your eventual team. So basically, you'll be able to play around with the team value, and there is a possibility, I've done it before, you can actually increase your team value quite significantly over this period. So my advice would be activate it now to make some team value. Now the next point I would like to talk about is the Arsenal triple up. So many people will be targeting the Arsenal triple up. They have Leicester at home in game week 6, Southampton at home in game week 7, and come game week 8 is Bournemouth away. So it's a set of 3 very good fixtures for Arsenal. Triple up is pretty much necessary, but do you go double defense or double attack? With Odegaard missing out, I think where I stand on this is that I would be leaning towards double defense. We've seen throughout from game week 1 all the way until now, their defense is just absolutely supreme. And when I look at the way that they defend, the way they control the games, even in slightly tougher oppositions, they still feel to me as if they are in a very solid block in terms of defense, and they don't feel as if they would concede despite playing difficult teams. So I really think that double defense is the way forward. But I know there will be a group of people thinking that Havertz up front as well as Saka, so doubling up on the attack, could be viable as well. So let me know where you stand in terms of double defense or double attack. I'm leaning towards double defense quite strongly, but I want to hear what those on double attack think as well. Now the next point I want to talk about is the Brentford attackers. Now Mbeumo is definitely going to be in everyone's draft, it's pretty much a given. He's on penalties, nailed for 90 minutes, Brentford's fixture swing is just so good, he is going to be the talisman. So it's more about whether you want to go for a second Brentford attacker with these kind of fixtures. Now, defense, you could go for Flecken, for example. You could go for Pinnock in defense. So I wouldn't want to be focusing on defense. My main question here is, would you want a second Brentford attacker? Because I do think there could be good value there. So the players I'm specifically talking about is Schade at 5.4 and Carvalho at 4.8. Now, they seem to be the players that are tipped to kind of fill the void that Vissa has left, because Vissa is now injured for a couple of months. They will have to get players to fill in those spots. Fixtures are still good for them. I still do expect Brentford to do well. So I do think like Schade and Carvalho are in positions where being very cheap can be very good value because of the fixtures that they have and how highly I rate the Brentford attack. So in terms of comparing Schade and Carvalho, definitely more in-depth comparison needs to be done. I will be doing that later on this week. But in terms of an initial thought, I think Schade playing through the number 9 spot, basically he is the one that is likely to play through the middle. I do think like he would be in better positions to get goals and get returns. So I think for now I'm leaning towards Schade. But Carvalho, I would think, is the slightly better player. He seems more clinical. We've also seen in the AFL Cup that he scored 2 goals, and he scored a goal and he assisted 2 as well. So I do think like Carvalho could be quite decent value. Now, going into game week 6, I'm recording this just before Brentford have played. I do think that game would be quite indicative for us into how Brentford would, set up without Vissa. And with that game in mind, you can also make a bit of a decision as to whether you prefer Schade or Carvalho. Let me know who you prefer down in the comments below. I'd be keen. And then the last point here I have is whether it is worth considering a City asset. Now, the reason why I say this is because from game week 7 onwards, starting with Fulham, Man City's fixture run is simply incredible. So we are slightly early on Man City's fixture run. They have Newcastle away now, which I do think is also a fixture they could do well in, given that Newcastle have been conceding quite a couple of goals and also don't look very solid in attack. So is it a good time to start bringing in more City assets aside from Haaland, because we know how good City is? So for the time being, I would think players like Vardiol, who seems to be the one that would likely get more minutes in terms of defenders or slightly more secure minutes despite him not starting in game week 4. So Vardiol is on my radar, but I do think for a while whether it would be worth it to go for an attacker, because there is upside there, but there's also definitely risk. So Savinho, for example, Grealish, if you want to go there. Doku feels a little bit too risky for me. And, Kevin De Bruyne at the 9.5 bracket, Foden as well. Will they come into the fray, and are they players we should be considering? So let me know. Do you have City players that you think are worth going for on a Game Week 6 wildcard? For the time being, I feel like I would probably only consider Haaland as well as Vardiol. I'm not so sure if Kevin De Bruyne, who is currently, injured, and, it seems as if he may miss the Arsenal versus Man City game on Sunday. Obviously, we have to keep a lookout on how that game goes on, but he could be out for a while, or at least he's nursing a bit of a niggle. So with that in mind, does Foden come in? And does Foden become an FPL option as well? So I think lots of things to consider and also many things to learn from the Man City versus Arsenal game. There will also be a video tomorrow that I can update this draft, and not only that, I will be discussing in depth a Game Week 6 wildcard versus a Game Week 7 wildcard, the main differences between those two. A bit of a spoiler is that I don't think the drafts would look too different, but I also do think like the opportunity cost is there in terms of the fixtures you would miss in Game Week 6, for example, if you wildcard now. And in 7, you also may miss out on a couple of things. So fine lines here. It's not clear cut, but let me know in the comments down below where you stand on it. If not, these are the things I would consider on a Game Week 6 wildcard. Let's now take a look at the fixture ticker. So looking at the fixture ticker, as we always have to do when we are building wildcard drafts, what I've done is I've taken a look at the next 6 game weeks, so Game Week 6 to Game Week 11, and I've sorted the teams in terms of how difficult their fixtures coming up are. So at the top of the ticker, we have Brentford. That one is pretty clear. A lot of us have been raving about Brentford's fixture swing coming up, but I don't really want to focus on teams that are obvious right now. I don't want to be talking about teams like Arsenal, Brentford, etc. We already know this. I want to speak about the other teams that, we need to build our squad around as well, that also have good fixtures, because at max, we can only triple up on a singular team. So we need players from other teams. So it's interesting that Manchester United are second on the fixture ticker. Now, I know what we all think about Manchester United, but they actually honestly do have a decent fixture run. In Game Week 6 and 7, maybe it's tough, but actually if you take a look at the fixture ticker further down the line from 8 all the way until even Game Weeks 12, 13 and 14, Manchester United have one of the best runs. So I do think like some consideration has to go there. I know the stigma around Manchester United assets, but I do think it is worth considering. And I would really only go for those kind of nailed players. So I wouldn't go for Garnacho or Ahmad, even though they're pretty cheap. I also wouldn't go for cheaper Manchester United defenders like, say for example, Mazraoui. I think the players I'd really be looking at are Dalot, Bruno Fernandes, and Marcus Rashford. Like only these three, who have started pretty much every other game this season, only them would I be looking at. I wouldn't be really willing to compromise elsewhere. So that's for Manchester United assets. Further down, right below them, it's West Ham. So Jarrod Bowen immediately comes to mind. I think defensively we don't really need to be afraid if we don't have a West Ham defender. But attacking wise, I think you do back Jarrod Bowen with the ability and the things that we know he can do to do well in this set of fixtures. Brentford away, Ipswich at home. Spurs away, not the easiest, but they've also been conceding a couple of goals. And then Manchester United at home, Nottingham Forest away, Everton at home. The run is decent for them. So Bowen also on the radar. Now, Nottingham Forest and Everton are next, right below West Ham. And these two teams do have quite a number of budget enablers, so it's worth considering as well. Chris Wood from Nottingham Forest can be considered. The Forest defense has also looked pretty good of late. Maybe a couple of 4.5s that we can consider. And from Everton, obviously Dominic Calvert-Lewin comes to mind as well. So I don't want to go on and on too many teams right now. But the last team I do want to mention is Spurs, because Spurs are here and they do seem to have a decent enough run moving forward, where they can, potentially kind of turn the season around. I wouldn't say turn the season around. They've been doing all right, but we know what they're capable of. We expect more of Spurs. And during this run, where it's a slightly better run of fixtures for them, could it be, what we see is them picking up a good run of results. So I do think like there could be a chance to hop on a couple of Spurs assets. Solanke comes to mind. Son may be a bit too expensive, but Pedro Porro in defense is also someone we can consider. I'm just starting to kind of die down a little bit on how hot I am on Porro. Initially, I kind of nailed him as someone I really want to keep on a Game Week 6 wildcard. But I thought about it, and I do think like defensively Spurs really struggle. So mostly I'd be thinking about attacking returns for Porro. So in that sense, maybe not the most ideal situation. But again, I will speak more about Pedro Porro in the kind of later section. But the point here is to say that Spurs fixtures are a decent bunch if we can find a good enough rotation pairing for them. So these are the teams I would be targeting on a Game Week 6 wildcard. Let me know down below what you think of the fixtures and any other players that I haven't mentioned from the kind of teams further down the list that you think are worth considering as well. If not, let's take a look at my wildcard shortlist. So what I have on the screen right now is my wildcard shortlist. So basically this is a practice that I do whenever I build wildcard drafts, especially if I'm wildcarding that week as well. So I thought I'd share my thought process in today's video as well to see if you guys want to adopt it for your own building of your Game Week 6 wildcard. So what I do usually is I have a look at literally all the players in FPL. So what I do is I have different categories. So I have the premiums, I have the semi-premiums, the mid-priced assets, as well as the budget assets, and I go category by category. So I go through the forwards and I have a look at any players that are even worth considering on a Game Week 6 wildcard. Now my criteria for this is pretty strict in a sense where so long as the player is not in this kind of watch list or short list, they basically will not appear in any of my Game Week 6 wildcard drafts. So I have very strict criteria. So basically a couple of things that I have to look at, whether they're good for minutes is one, whether I think their potential is there. If they're not good for minutes, then is the upside good enough to warrant them being included in this list as well? So I have different sets of criteria as to whether I think players should be included in this list or not. And the moment they enter this list, this is where I start to pick out the wildcard squad. So let's go through one by one. I want to speak about every single player, but I just want to go category by category to just talk through a couple of picks that I have here. So Haaland in the premium forwards position, don't really need to speak about him. And he in fact has a star next to his name. The reason for the star, or what the star is there for basically, is to indicate that that player is locked in on my Game Week 6 wildcard. So you'll see 3 other stars as well. I will speak about them later on. But Haaland, definitely a lock in my Game Week 6 wildcard. Further down the list, there's Watkins and Havertz in the semi-premium range. Now, they have been obviously doing decently enough this season so far. Fixtures are also there for both of them. They are obviously slightly more expensive, so more consideration has to be given to as to whether they are worth the amount that we're paying for them. Havertz obviously would form part of the triple up on Arsenal if we were to pick him as well. So that would likely mean a Havertz, Saka plus a defensive asset, so a double attack for Arsenal if we do pick Havertz as well. Now in the mid-price range, I have Solanke as well as Mateta. And in the budgets region for forwards, there's quite a number of options. So I do foresee some decisions have to be made here as to which budget forward to go for. There's Chris Wood from Nottingham Forest, which we did see in the Fixture Ticker section. Nottingham Forest being quite high up the ticker. And Ketia is here as well. Calvert-Lewin and Vardy, the kind of bigger decisions that we were making in Game Week 5 as to, whether to sell João Pedro to Calvert-Lewin or Vardy. Now both of them make this list here as well because the fixtures are still there for them, and what they offered in Game Week 5 is still what they offer in Game Week 6, where the minutes look pretty good and obviously likely on penalties as well, and very cheap, both of them. Now João Pedro is in this list here as kind of the last budget forward here because I do think like there is a bit of or part of me that does think him being on penalties and also him playing for Brighton, who are a pretty solid attacking side, regardless of who they play, I do think like there is some consideration to give to João Pedro, so he makes this list as well. Now in the midfield range, also a lot of players here. So in the premium range, there's Salah, Palmer, Saka and Son, but really the only player that I know is locked for me is Saka, and I honestly do think like it'd be quite hard to fit players like Salah, Palmer and Son into the team. I don't feel as if they justify being in the squad, but the reason why they are in this short list is that I do think, like if I'm looking in the premium category, if somehow I have enough money and I can stretch to a Son, for example, to take advantage of the Tottenham fixture run, then I don't mind it as well. So they are in this short list, but honestly speaking, I think Salah, Palmer and Son would be pretty hard to fit into a Game Week 6 wildcard based on the draft that I'm building. Now, for the semi-premiums, there's Kevin De Bruyne, Foden and Fernandes. Now, Kevin De Bruyne, obviously, what we know right now is that he has a bit of an injury. Will he start in the Arsenal versus Man City game? Remains to be seen. And does that also mean that Foden becomes an option? So we'll see what happens there. Lots to be learned from that game, but they make the shortlist as well. And then Fernandes here, is mainly because he's so nailed, he's on penalties, and obviously Manchester United is second on the fixture ticker that we saw just now. Now, mid-priced assets-wise, also quite a number of options, but Mbeumo is the only one that's locked. I have Bowen, Eze, Rashford, also players I'm considering. Savinho here, yes, the minutes may not be super secure for him, but I think there is upside there to go for him as well. So I think it's worth having him in the shortlist just to think about whether I want to go for him. But I think players like Grealish as well could also be considered, but I've chosen to just include Savinho here because he's really the only one with enough upside that I will go for. Now, in the budget region for midfielders, also quite a number of options. We have Semenyo, decent fixtures in 6 and 7 that Bournemouth have, so I do think like he would be quite a popular pick on a wild card. Shada and Carvalho as the second Brentford attacker that we talked about in the first section of today's video also make this list. Now Rodgers, I know what we think about Rodgers, but at the end of the day, still getting 90 minutes pretty much every other game, and he's playing for a very decent attacking side, so he makes the list as well. Now Dibbling here is just a 4.5 million enabler, but he seems to me like the best one. So if I'm looking for a 4.5 million cheap midfielder, he's probably the one I will go for. Now defenders wise, lots of options in the premium region. Gabriel the only one that's locked in. I don't think that I would go for Saliba in terms of double defense. If I'm to go for double defense, I likely prefer the Gabriel plus Raya double up. But we'll speak about the goalkeepers later on. But that's why I don't have Saliba as a star as well, despite being very keen on the double Arsenal defense. Right, so other options in the premium range for defenders that are worth considering is still the Liverpool defenders because there is still value there and they're still very attacking. But Vardiol makes this list because I think out of all the City defenders, he feels the most nailed to me. And I do know that he missed out in game week 4, but I think moving forward, we will see, at least he's the one that I'm the most confident of. And also, game week 7 onwards, I do think there are clean sheets, pretty good odds of clean sheets at least for Man City, despite them not keeping a lot of clean sheet this season so far. Right, so Vardiol makes this list. Porro and Dalot, as I've mentioned, Manchester United fixtures get me, and Porro also very good attacking threat. So both of them make this list. In the mid-price region, Rico Lewis, I'm yet to consider whether I think he's worth going for. There's a lot of risk there. For Arsenal defenders, Konza and Pau Torres, the ones I'm looking at. Pinnock for Brentford defenders, that's where I'll go 4.5. Murillo for Nottingham Forest as well, them being quite high up the ticker and them being pretty solid defensively. I've also included Moreno and Aina below Murillo. Now, in the budget region, just the kind of cheap enablers to have as bench fodders, there's Wout Faes, there's also Vandenberg, potentially someone that people would be considering as a kind of 4.0 million starter for Brentford. But I think there's a bit of risk to consider with him in that I think if they start with a back 5 or back 3, for example, I think Vandenberg would be included. But if not, I think maybe he drops down and Collins and Pinnock are the first choice in terms of a back 4, for example. So I don't think he's super secure for minutes, but at least given that he has a decent chance of starting, I think it's worth including him here. Now there's Greaves and Mosquera. Now those two for me feel like the best ones to go for. So in my own draft, a bit of a spoiler, but I have Greaves, but Mosquera from game week 10 onwards looks pretty good as well. So things to consider. In the goalkeeper range, just to wrap it up, Raya is the premium. He's pretty much the one I'm likely to go for. The only reason why I haven't put a star next to his name is because there is a chance I may prefer Flecken and Verbruggen as the kind of keeper rotation that I have in the mid-price region here. So if I do go for that, then maybe I go for Gabriel and Saliba. So I haven't confirmed that yet, but Raya definitely in my mind for premium keepers. Flecken and Verbruggen, as I've said, they rotate really well all the way until game week 19. So they're on my radar as well. Sells is here simply because Forest have looked pretty decent defensively, so I think he's worth including in the list. Now budget kind of goalkeepers wise, at 4.4 there's Muric and there's also Ramsdale. But honestly speaking, I don't think I'd go there. I just think it's worth considering them because they've made quite a number of good saves and the fixtures moving forward are decent enough for these keepers. But if not, the bench for the keeper I'd probably go for is Fabianski because Areola does have quite a poor injury record. So if any keeper is likely to get a start, I think it's Fabianski. So doing a bit of this kind of a Wildcard Shortlist just helps me to focus my thoughts as to where would I look at with the amount of money I have left. So I put in usually the essentials that I go for. So I put in Haaland, Saka, Mbeumo and Gabriel. I start including a couple of other players that I like from this list. And then with the amount of money left, I usually look at what's the category, and I also look at how much money I have. Should I be looking at the premium, semi-premium, mid-priced or budget range, and then I pick within there. So that's how I kind of use the shortlist. So now let's take a look at the wildcard draft that I have with obviously some of these picks here and why I've kind of chosen them over the other players within this shortlist category as well. So looking at the Game Week 6 wild card, this is my first draft for Game Week 6. It's 99.6 team value, so I think it's pretty affordable. And it's also a 3-4-3 formation. Now the usual caveats apply in that this is only a first draft. It is almost guaranteed to change by the time we get to the Game Week 6 deadline. But I do like the structure that we have here. So let me talk through a couple of players that I've gone for. So keeper pairing wise, it's Raya and Fabianski. Fabianski being the backup keeper is simply because I think he has the highest chance of starting if Areola kind of gets injured again. Now Raya here forms the defensive double up that I have in the Arsenal defense with Raya and Gabriel. So I do think that going forward, I kind of want a set and forget keeper. And I think we've seen in the first few game weeks already that Raya is not actually a keeper that has a 6-point ceiling, as was what I thought before going into this season. But looking at the way it's turned out, he's been getting 8-pointers, 10-pointers, 9-pointers. And I do think like Raya is a very decent set and forget keeper when we are talking about an Arsenal defense that just looks so solid recently. So I just think Raya plus Gabriel as my defensive kind of set and forget for the next few game weeks of the season. This is where I want to go. So I have these two players. Now in terms of the other defenders that I've gone for, it's Trent, Pinnock, and then on the bench it's Porro and Greaves as the bench fodder. So speaking about Trent first, he is obviously a premium defender, and I do think we're spending quite a bit of money on him. But I also do think like the Liverpool defense is worth backing on, at least for the minimally the next 4 to 5 game weeks, because the fixtures are still there for them. When it's come the time around game weeks, maybe 8, game week 9, where I could consider dropping him, then fair enough. But if not, even if I want to hold him through the slightly tougher fixtures, they are still at the end of the day Liverpool, defensively still pretty sound this season, so I don't mind having to hold Trent all the way as well. And I think he is pretty much due an attacking return, like how good he's been as a defender, but sometimes, playing in the midfield positions when necessary and just putting up really good attacking numbers. You add the clean sheet potential. I do think like he's worth the money. So Trent is still here in the draft over Robertson. I'm spending the extra for the greater attacking threat. Now, Pinnock here is simply because of Brentford's fixture run. I think it's so good, and defensively they're quite sound as well, with a good number of home games in this good run. So I do think like Pinnock is a safe pick to go for from a Brentford defense. I don't think Vandenberg is someone that I would go for simply because I prefer the security. That's just the kind of FPL manager that I am. So I've gone for Pinnock here so that I do foresee a couple of rotations that I need for my defense, especially when I have Porro here playing Manchester United away. So Porro on the bench, he is someone that I would rotate in and out depending on how good Spurs fixtures are, because I really don't back them for clean sheets. So as you see here, I'm kind of benching them against Manchester United, in hopes that maybe in future game weeks I would be able to use him. And I think the attacking potential that he possesses is worth spending 5.5 on him. So I have him on the bench. Greaves is the bench fodder that I've chosen over Mosquera because Wolves' fixture run only really turns from about game week 10, game week 11 onwards. So in the unlikely event that I need to use Greaves in the near future, I want to be at least having good fixtures for this 4.0 million bench fodder. So Greaves is the one that I've gone for here because Ipswich have a decent enough run. Now, in the midfield, I have Mbeumo, Semenyo, Schade, Saka, and Rodgers on the bench. So speaking about Saka first, he forms the third Arsenal asset that I have, pretty much locked, so I don't want to discuss too much on him. Same with Mbeumo as well. These two players I think would be pretty much every other Game Week 6 wildcard drafts. But I've gone for a very cheap midfield. I've gone for Semenyo, Schade, and Rodgers. So I do think there is value, as I've mentioned, in going for a second Brentford attacker. For the time being, I am landing on Schade instead of Fabio Carvalho, but it's very close. And I think I could very well just yo-yo between the two of them all the way up till the deadline. But I do think Schade, because he's likely going to play through the middle, is where I'm thinking for now. For Semenyo, again in game week 6 and 7 is really good fixtures. 8, 9 and 10, it's not as good fixtures for him. But then after that, from game week 10 onwards, at least all the way up till maybe game week 19, he has a pretty decent enough run. So he's a player I foresee keeping for the long run, and when he has tough fixtures, I bench him. I don't intend to sell him actually. So that's why I have Rodgers on the bench. He has Ipswich in game week 6, so actually he does have a decent enough fixture where I could start him ahead of Schade, for example. But Rodgers here is mainly to rotate a bit with Semenyo when Semenyo's fixtures are slightly bad from 8 to 10. So that's the thinking behind him, but I also have enough money in the bank. I actually have, for my own team, 0.7 million left, so I can actually consider upgrading Rodgers to a minimum of 5.5, for example. So I am considering that, but what Rodgers offers still is quite attractive to me in terms of a 90-minute asset and also playing for a decent attacking side, or a very strong attacking side in fact. So I like Rodgers here, and that's why I've chosen to bank the extra 0.7 million. But again, I have the money, so I can go elsewhere. In terms of forwards, I have Watkins, Haaland, and Calvert-Lewin. So I'm not even going to speak about Haaland. He is a must-have for Game Week 6 wildcard. But I've chosen to go for a premium attacker in Watkins here. A semi-premium, I should say. And then a cheap forward, I've chosen Calvert-Lewin out of all the kind of budget options we saw just now. So for Watkins, this is by no means a locked pick, because I am quite concerned of John Duran, and he is someone that would start to take minutes off Watkins. Now I do think like there will be a point in time this season where we will see John Duran and Watkins both playing on the pitch at the same time, and that is what Unai Emery has alluded to as well, where he just wants to find a way to fit both of them in because both of them are so good. So I think that could, if we see that moving forward, I think Watkins could be a decent enough longer term option. But at least with the fixtures that they have in game week 6, 7 and 8 at least, I do think it's okay to go for Ollie Watkins and maybe take about 65 to 70 minutes, maybe 75 minutes at best every other week for these next few game weeks. Because I do think the potential is still there for him to score well in those games. And I like the creativity of the Aston Villa squad and the chances that Watkins is getting. He's actually been getting chances since game week 1. But he really only started putting them away from game week 4, and that's why people started jumping on him. But he's still a quality asset, slowly getting up to speed as well. So I don't mind having him here. At 9 million, quite expensive, but it justifies it to me. But he's not locked because I'm concerned about the minutes. So I could go elsewhere with the money. But in terms of other cheap budget forward options that I've gone for here, it's Calvert-Lewin. Now there's a lot of other players I could have gone for here. I could have gone for Vardy. I could have gone for Chris Wood, for example. And Nketiah is also someone that could fill in this spot. But I've gone for the good fixtures that Everton have, the nailedness of Calvert-Lewin whenever he's fit, if he can stay fit, which seems to be the case at least for this season, and also him being on penalties. So Everton, I would say attackingly, they have been creating decent enough chances for Calvert-Lewin. Defensively, they look poor, so there's no kind of disagreeing with that one. But I do think like there are attacking returns for Calvert-Lewin in the next few game weeks, and the fixtures are good. So I just want to take a bit of a gamble on him as compared to Vardy, for example, because I think Calvert-Lewin doesn't really have a real replacement in that, players that would kind of take minutes off him. Yes, he can be substituted in situations where they want to rest him and manage his minutes. But as he builds up his fitness, I do foresee him in the future getting 90 minutes once he's able to, as compared to Vardy, where I think he's slightly getting old now. And I do think like in the future when there are better kind of forward options that are coming up for Leicester, because Odsonne-Edouard is there, when he starts to come into the fray, score a couple of goals, could he start taking more minutes off Vardy as well? I think there's more danger there as compared to Calvert-Lewin. So with this kind of cheap budget forward position, I really just want a set and forget player. So Calvert-Lewin is the one I've gone for here. That's the thinking behind him. So there we go with this Game Week 6 wildcard draft. Again, very early, by no means confirmed, but I want to know what you guys think and what changes I should make to this draft down below in the comments. Please let me know. where you would tweak this draft, because we're on a Game Week 6 wildcard here on this channel, and we're going to try and build the best one for Game Week 6. So let me know all the discussion points, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It took quite a bit of time to put today's video together, and do turn on the notification bells, because tomorrow there will also be another video on the Game Week 6 wildcard. As I've mentioned, I've started doing extensive research already. So tomorrow's video, I will be discussing the main differences between a Game Week 6 wildcard and a Game Week 7 wildcard for those who are on the fence. But if not, please do hit down and subscribe if you haven't already. We are almost going to hit 9,000 subscribers. If we've hit it by the time you're watching this, then thank you very much for helping to support the channel. And if not, I will catch you guys in more Game Week 6 content coming very soon. Bye bye.